All right, so since I forgot to start the recording when I should have, we covered the Eastern Orthodox churches, this group of 16 churches that are independent of one another, but they cooperate. They're self-governing within their own ecclesiastical organization, but they regard each other as fellow travelers. And a couple of 100 million members, 16 Orthodox churches. Then there's the Oriental Orthodox Church that disagrees with the Eastern Orthodox churches only on a point of doctrine related to the nature of Christ. And then the Assyrian Church of the East. If you can imagine a map of the Holy Land remember where Assyria is, up north of Israel or Palestine. So you go up north there and over into what we now call Eastern Turkey and along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers over into Iraq. That's the area where the Assyrian Church of the East is found. Now, the thing about the Assyrian Church of the East is their liturgy, their worship is in classic Syriac. So the Eastern Orthodox churches, some worship in Greek, some worship in Russian, some worship in other Slavic languages. The Assyrian Church of the East worships in Syriac, and they regard themselves as very, very ancient, like back to the apostles. And they also have a disagreement with these other two sets of churches over the nature of Christ, which I'll touch on when we get to that point. But I just wanted, those are the three kind of groups we're going to talk about tonight, and a little bit about their distinction. Now, one more thing I want to say is that there are Orthodox Christians all over the world now. The Orthodox Church of America, of course, it started out to be an immigrant denomination. People moving from the eastern part of the world who are Orthodox came to America, started Orthodox churches. The Orthodox Church of America was actually founded, you might say, by the Russian Orthodox Church through Alaska. So, lots of interesting things like that, but we have to think of immigration as a big part of the picture for the Orthodox churches in America. Okay, this next part, breaking these Orthodox churches down into kind of three historical categories. The ancient churches, we know the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople. We know about, we'll look at the Byzantine era. But these are churches that exist still today as a part of the Eastern Orthodox churches. So the Patriarchate of Constantinople is one of the Eastern Orthodox churches. The Greek Orthodox Patriarchate of Alexandria, that's a city in northern Egypt. It's part of the Orthodox churches. Same with Antioch of Syria. So we could go back to the book of Acts to realize its origins. The Patriarchate of Antioch. And then finally, the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate of Jerusalem, right? Now, one thing I should mention, yeah, Joni?
You're going to get to what patriarchate means, right?
Okay, so patriarch means father, and a patriarchate is like the archbishop, or even like we might say the pope, because we know about the Roman Catholic Church, but pope in a smaller sense, over a smaller geographic area.
Which we met the guy, the patriarch of the Jerusalem church, like Greek Orthodox, and we went into it was magnificent.
Yeah, yeah.
But he was very old. He was ancient.
Right, yeah. Okay, so those are the Eastern Orthodox churches that trace their roots back, way back in the history of Orthodoxy. Now, these other churches, just to give you a sense, the Russian Orthodox Church got started in the the 900s, late 800s, 900s. The Georgian Orthodox Church, Georgia, next to Russia, the Serbian Orthodox Church, the Bulgarian Orthodox Church, the Romanian Orthodox Church, all have been started by missionaries from one of the other Orthodox groups. Now, some of these churches say in their histories that they trace their church history back to one of the apostles, but not all of them do. So it's a mixture there. But there are some Orthodox churches that are currently in existence that got started not during the ancient times, but in the more medieval times. And then today, the Church of Cyprus. So you know where Cyprus is in the Mediterranean Sea. The Church of Greece. That's the Orthodox Church in Greece. Obviously, Paul and the other apostolic band that shared the gospel in Greece, they trace their lineage back to the apostolic times. The Polish Orthodox Church, the Orthodox Church of the Czech lands and Slovakia. These are the official names of these churches. The Orthodox Church of America. So 1794, a mission from Russia crossed the Bering Strait into Alaska and began the Orthodox faith there. And then in 1924, the Orthodox Church of America became its own self-governing church. And I thought it was interesting. So the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, we've been kind of watching the war between Russia and Ukraine. In 2018, it received recognition as a self-governing church. What church was it a part of until 2018? Russia, right. So one of the things about the story of these churches is how much they are tied up with I'll just say national politics. And so I thought that was interesting that's a relatively new church, even though Orthodoxy has been in Ukraine for centuries, but as a church, it's new. Now here, I thought it was interesting. So this is the mission statement of the Orthodox Church in America. This should look very familiar to United Methodists. And remind me, folks, you on Zoom, you can see my slides, right?
Yes.
Okay. The United Methodist Church has the same mission statement as the Orthodox Church in America. Just thought that was kind of interesting.
Isn't that the mission statement
Of the church?
Yeah, of the church.
It very well could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. Just getting the lay of the land. There will be a test on this at the end of the class.
I'll be absent.
Yeah. Okay. I mentioned the Oriental Orthodox Church. So the Eastern Orthodox churches, we just touched on them. The Oriental Orthodox Church are these 6 churches. The Coptic Orthodox Church, that's in Egypt. The Syriac Orthodox Church, that's in Syria. Oh, I wanted to say that the Eastern Assyrian Church, their headquarters is in northern Iraq. So there are Christians in these places where we think there are no Christians, and they are beleaguered Christians, right? And many of them have fled because of the violence and the danger. But anyway, Oriental Orthodox Church, Coptic in Egypt, Syriac in Syria, Armenian Apostolic Church, Malankara Orthodox Syrian Church. Notice the Syrian, but that's a church in India. So Orthodoxy in India is connected to the Syrian Orthodoxy. Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, the Eritrean Orthodox Tewahedo Church. Tewahedo is, there's a language called Gaze or Geese. It's G, in English, it's G-E''E'-Z. So they regard themselves as old as any church. So when you think about the Ethiopian eunuch, for example, this church regards their beginning as going back there. There's also, this is an interesting, there's also, it's reported that the Ark of the Covenant from Jerusalem is in Ethiopia, in one of these churches. I can neither confirm nor deny. Now, what sets them apart? Why are they not in communion with the Eastern Orthodox churches, even though they're Orthodox? That's because they don't agree with the Eastern Orthodox churches on the nature of Christ. Now, I know this is technical, but it is very important, and I'm going to try to give you a little glimpse of why it's important for our relationship with God. They use the term miaphysite. This comes from two Greek words, mia, meaning one, physis, one nature. Now, the Chalcedonian description of the nature of Christ is two natures existing perfectly, fully in the one person, Jesus Christ. Two natures, one person. And one of the really important salvation truths about Jesus sharing our nature, sharing divine nature, is he is our mediator. Christ puts us in touch with the living God, right? So, think of the options. Jesus is not really divine, some people would say. He's not really God. He's just somebody who has this kind of exalted awareness of God. Really, boy, he's really dialed in with God. And so his insights about God, his wisdom, his teaching, his moral example are all really helpful. But still, if you think that way, whatever Jesus is, if he's not divine, then we're not really in touch with God. We're getting a kind of a little bit of a copy maybe of something. And in that case, Jesus isn't really much different than we are. He's just more of whatever we are, right? Better of whatever we are. So the two natures idea really matters for our faith. Because if Christ is not fully God, then, he's a good teacher. He could be helpful to us, but it's kind of, choose him, choose somebody else, choose five different sources, and you can be good with all of them, right? All right. Now, when that decision was made at Chalcedon in 451, there were groups of people, leaders, bishops, who said, no, we do not agree with that. And this is where it does get pretty technical, and I just don't think I could do it justice in the time we have. So the Oriental Orthodox Church have the formulation that Christ is one unified nature. One nature, but unified. Now hold on, because the other group, it's going to get a little more technical. One unified nature. So they believe Christ is fully divine and fully human, but it's one nature. Now, why do they think that? Because to them, if you say two natures, well, then how do those two natures get together in the one person? Two natures sounds like separate, like two persons in one body. So they did not agree with that kind of description of the nature of Christ. So notice, they're after the same thing that I just described. We're looking for language to help us know how is it that we're really in touch with the living God. Vital connection where we can say, I know God because of Christ. I know the living God. I have a relationship with him. How do I know that? Right? Well, we can say, well, it's based on faith, and that's true. But these leaders of the church are looking for a way to make it as clear as possible. So the Miaphysites felt like Chalcedon didn't get it right, and they came up with this way of talking about it. One unified nature. So fully divine and fully human, but one nature, not a divine nature and a human nature, one nature. Now, the Chalcedonians think there are problems with that way of describing it, and that's for another class, another time. Let me stop. Any questions?
Do they have a teaching or whole nation, the Trinity? Does that come up at all?
Oh, yeah, they're,
So Holy Spirit, I mean, okay, Jesus. Kind of God, Jesus God.
yeah. Yeah, all these churches that we're looking at would say the Nicene Creed, for example.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't mention that, and I probably should have, but yes, they'll say the Nicene Creed. Okay, I told you about this Assyrian Church of the East, and let's see if I can get my map to work. Okay, I'm not gonna mess with it. The settings. Can you see this?
Yes.
This is a Russian Orthodox bishop in the middle, and a couple of other bishops and priests and acolytes. So this is this could be sort of a high holy day of some kind, or it could be a more normal kind of worship service. That's one of the ways that we really, when you travel abroad and you experience these kinds of things, we realize, man, I mean, they're Christians, we're Christians. I don't understand a word they're saying. There's nothing in this worship service that I recognize until maybe we get to the Holy Communion. And we know they're reading the Bible, some things like that, but we can't understand anything. We don't know what they're doing.
No skinny jeans.
Yeah, no skinny jeans, that's for sure. Okay, now Joni and I had the chance to go to Turkey last year for the commemoration of the Council of Nicaea. So I'm going to show you a few pictures that we took. This is an Orthodox church. Sorry?
Nothing. They're the same church, both of the pictures.
Yeah, all these pictures now. Oh, yeah, okay, sorry. This is the outside walking in. It's not a big church. This is the inside. Look at how ornate it is. Gold plate, gold leaf, silver. What we're looking at here, we're looking at the priest, of course. He met us to let us into the church. And the other guy is our guide. What you see behind them, this is what Richard made reference to. This wall here, or screen, is called the iconostasis. And so one of the things about Eastern Orthodox churches is the icons. Icons everywhere. The word icon means image. Like we're created in God's image. We are icons of God, right? So these icons are everywhere. And that iconostasis divides the worship area between where the mystery happens, which is behind. We can look inside there. They do open the door and let you look inside, but only the priest and the people helping him with the service that day can go back behind that iconostasis where the sacrament is blessed and like I say, the mystery of salvation happens. This is directly above us in that sanctuary. And again, you can see one of the things about Orthodox churches, most of them will have a dome in the ceiling. And that dome is meant to reflect, to sort of image and symbolize heaven. It's one of the things about the Orthodox Church. It's really stressed that the divine mystery, the liturgy, the worship service is a participation in the heavenly mystery. So it's a little bit like being in heaven, or kind of right on the edge of heaven, where at least we can look in. And so that's the dome overarching this worship space.
And are those the disciples?
Around the outside edge.
One of the,
Probably, yeah, I'm not sure about that, but that would be a legitimate guess.
actually, we went to a service in Wichita at the Orthodox Church
Uh-huh.
on 13th Street.
Yeah,
Magnificent on the inside.
right,
But so I didn't understand what's going on, but so
Right.
we were looking at the dome and figuring out which disciple was who.
yeah,
So,
Yeah. lots and lots of symbolism.
Well, and for people that are not literate or don't understand what they're saying, that's a good way to turn.
Right.
I mean,
Right. Yeah, the icons tell a story, they do. Yeah. Okay, now this is in the same room, of course, and if you look toward the back of the picture, so to speak, beyond this table here, you can see the opening into the iconostasis, but you get a little wider view, just all the lights, all the gold, all the silver, all the symbolism. We have on the left here, we have Alpha, and on the right, we have Omega. And I mean, which we did, we stood around for a long time just trying to take in all the different meanings of the icons. Now, this table, you can see we're standing in the worship space. This is not a big church. It would easily fit inside our sanctuary here, easily. Not a big church, and they don't have that many members. This is Turkey, it's in Istanbul, and there just aren't that many Christians. So their Christian numbers are small, even though this church is an ancient church, right? Small numbers. Anyway, we're standing in the worship space, and in the middle of that space is this table with, guess what? More icons. So there they put the season of the year, some event that they're commemorating in the life of the church. They'll put the appropriate icons on that table in the middle of the worship space. This is just one of the little enclave type things, that several of these around the perimeter of this worship area, and you can just see more icons. There's obviously the Virgin Mary with our Lord as a baby.
Steve,
Yes.
are those like individual worship places, or is that someplace somebody would go into and for a time alone or something? What's the purpose?
So I think it's a little bit that, but more, this, as I say, it's not a big area. So it's not like if you've been in some bigger Catholic churches where they have they're like side chapels where you can actually go in and sit down before an altar and pray and that sort of thing. You can't do that here, but you could. You could have a moment of devotion. If you found this particular icon meaningful in a certain way, you could go stand and pray in front of it. You could do that during the Sunday worship time if you wanted to. But I don't think it's the sort of thing where people would go there individually for any length of time. Yeah, Joni?
It's a little more like when you're in that worship space, you're among the great cloud of witnesses. Because they're all of the witnesses.
Right.
Some of them you know about, and some of them that only that church knew, but there are pictures of them everywhere. It's like that's what it symbolizes, I think.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point. So I should have mentioned that. That's a good point. Yeah, the great cloud of witnesses. Okay. I'm sure I can. I'm sure this won't work. Yeah. I'm going to fix this because I want you to listen to some of the liturgy. Just a couple of minutes. It's really, really, really stunning. One of the things about Orthodox churches, you can tell by their worship space, beauty matters to the Orthodox. Because beauty is an act of worship, right? It's a reflection of God's beauty, the beauty of God's holiness, right? So I'll figure out how to do that, and I'll share that with you next week. Just a little bit this liturgy is the liturgy of Saint John Chrysostom. He was the patriarch of Constantinople. So that's like the head church back in his day. That's the 4th century, so the 300s. And they still use the liturgy that he helped to devise, and then it was added to, but it's in his, it's under his name. This is in English, so you can hear them chanting like Richard was mentioning before. And then I want to play Tchaikovsky's, we'll do a little bit of this too, Tchaikovsky's Hymn of the Cherubim. The Hymn of the Cherubim is one of the songs sung in Orthodox worship. In the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, Hymn of the Cherubim is part of the worship order. And this Tchaikovsky rendering is stunning. It's just stunning. So I'll figure out how to share that, and we'll do that next week. Now, a little bit about Orthodox worship in terms of how they lay it out. And as we mentioned earlier, Richard's participated. Joni and I have been to an Orthodox church service a couple of times. They're long. And you do stand. And it really breaks down into 3 parts. The liturgy of preparation, that's what the priests, the officiants are doing. They go through a regime of prayers and chants and singing, and they're preparing to lead the worship. Then there's a liturgy of the catechumens, so people who are not yet members. This is the public part of the worship service, you might say. Now, by the way, you're going to find a lot of variety among Orthodox churches, just the way we do Protestant churches. There's going to be a lot of variety. But this is, if you want to do the Orthodox worship, the full meal deal, so to speak, this is how it's going to be done. And there's a lot of detail in between these, of course. The liturgy of the catechumens, right? The catechumens are people preparing to profess their faith in Christ and join the Orthodox Church. They're going to be baptized and become members. So there's singing, praying, and teaching in relation to, the catechumens. The scriptures are read, the gospel is read, and so on. And then, when that part of the service is over, the catechumens leave. And then there's the liturgy of the faithful. So these are the church members, right? And that's where the sacrament of Holy Communion will take place. Again, with prayers, chants, hymns. It's really beautiful. It is long for what we're accustomed to, but it really is beautiful. They take worship very seriously. Okay, I'm about to wrap it up here. And once again, I apologize for all the awkwardness and not having things right. We should have come 2 hours before. So I want you to, imagine some of what you know from the New Testament. Jerusalem, of course, was a major center of the church early. You can think about Acts 15, for example, and the Jerusalem Council. And the elders of the church in Jerusalem seem to have some sort of authority for what's happening in Antioch and other places where now Gentile peoples are becoming Christian, and it's raising all these questions about what, how do they enter into the faith that was really started out as a Jewish faith, right? Jesus is the Messiah of the Jews. Well, he's the Messiah for the whole world. But so those kinds of things. So we remember the Jerusalem church. And then there's the church in Antioch, which I mentioned already. That's in Syria. And then the church in Alexandria in Egypt. And then there's Rome. Now, this is not an Orthodox church, right? This is a Catholic church, Roman Catholic. But that becomes a center for Christianity in the West. And then, of course, Constantinople, which is really the heart of Orthodox Christianity for centuries. Now, I put here informally at first because we have to remember that the earliest decades of the Christian faith, the leadership of the church it's not, we don't have a structure. We have relationships, we have gifted people, we have Paul appointing some people as elders to oversee a congregation. We remember that the congregation would have been probably, as the church grew in an area like, let's just take Antioch, as the church in Antioch grew, there were probably several congregations worshiping in houses, right? So groups of people, 20, 30 people, something that would fit within, maybe one of the more prominent members has a house with a courtyard and they could meet in there, or a bigger room where they could meet. So overseers, the Bible also talks about overseers or bishops, were like the head pastor in a local area like that. And eventually, by the end of the first century, we have more organization. We have what becomes known as, well, in the early second century at least, we have what's known as the mono-episcopate. So one bishop. So there'd be not several overseers, but one overseer over the presbyters, over the elders. So the presbyters or the elders are going to be pastoring these local congregations, and the overseer bishop, single, now has sort of a pastoral and administrative role and authority over all the congregations. And since the church started in urban areas, the New Testament church, these are urban areas. Since it started there, the church spread out from these centers out into the countrysides. So that bishop then would become the head pastor over a larger area. In the West, the Roman Catholic Church calls them a diocese. They use a term from the Roman Empire. It's a secular term. A diocese is an area that's covered by a bishop. In the East, they use different words, but a word like patriarchate, right? You get different words that are rooted in the Greek language rather than in maybe Latin. The word for diocese, that's a Roman word. So, and these councils, 325, which is Nicaea, 381, which is Constantinople, 451, which is Chalcedon. I'm going to touch on these. But there were official decisions made at these councils to organize these churches with some sense of, well, I shouldn't say some sense, it's not that vague, but a strong connection. There's a sense of mutuality, and the bishops or the patriarchs of these churches were peers with each other. Now, the one thing I want us to notice at this point, and then I'll move on. At this point, the Bishop of Rome is not seen as overall the church, right? The Bishop of Rome is the Bishop of Rome, just like the Patriarch of Constantinople is the Patriarch of Constantinople. They are peers. Now, eventually, Constantinople becomes the kind of the first among the peers, right? So the bishop there, the patriarch there, has this role, not exactly authority where he can tell people what to do, but a kind of influence and sort of assumed authority because of the prominence of Constantinople as the seat of the Roman Empire. So I'm just gesturing a little bit here about how these Orthodox churches that I mentioned earlier that are now in existence, how they really got started in New Testament efforts and developed into these highly organized church groups. That's it for tonight. Now, where are we going? I raised 2 or 3 theological issues. I'm going to go back now to the beginning. We're going to look at some scriptures next week, and we're going to try to see with some time, the sort of the major outlines of Eastern Orthodox teaching. so that we can then see how that teaching affects us in the West, particularly for those of us in the United Methodist tradition. There's a part of it that's very influential for Methodists, and we'll get to that. But for now, we'll stop with this little introduction to Orthodoxy. Any questions? Comments?
I have a question. So at the time that you had the last slide, so at the time of the councils, they didn't call themselves Orthodox or Catholic, did they? They were just the church.
The way.
You could run across the word Catholic, of course, in descriptions, but it wasn't really thought of as part of the name. They would refer to the Catholic faith.
Okay.
And everybody is part of the Catholic faith, unless you were a heretic, right? So it wasn't.
At that time, they didn't divide themselves up between Orthodoxy and something else. They were just the church.
They were the church, the Orthodox faith that we all share, right? And we're gonna go over that. Some of this I know you know already. You just know this, but in order to keep our bearings and to be able to see where we're going, then I think we ought to do it that way. Yeah.
Just a comment, it's a little off topic. I'm apparently she who should not be named. But for those of you who don't know, I do have a name. I'm Linda Allison.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Linda. How did I do it earlier? I didn't see you on the screen, I guess. I'm so sorry.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Linda. Who are you and where are you from?
I'm Linda Allison. I'm from Florence, Kansas. We've been here for, I don't know, 55 or so years. A long time.
I'm very sorry. Thank you for catching that. Yeah. Okay, friends. We'll smooth out the kinks and I'll see you next week.
Bring it.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Hey.